library friends. This is Miss Cindy from the Crown Point Community Library, and today I'm going to be bringing the library into your home with a STEAM to Go activity. So I hope that you've enjoyed our summer reading programs. I hope that you've come into the library and picked up these kits to go, and you've gone home and you've put different things together and you've been having a good time. I've been enjoying this journey with you, and I'm sad to say that this is the last of our STEAM to Go for summer reading. There will probably be other activities still to come, but this is our last STEAM to Go activity kit that we'll have. So this one's kind of a little bit different. You'll notice that it has a big gigantic question mark, which means that we don't know what's inside your bag. I can't even tell you what's in your bag. I'm not going to open it up and show you because every bag is going to have different things in it, and every bag will have its own different mystery challenge. So, as I like to do, I like to start by giving you some information or reading you a story. And so I chose for this book, since our summer reading theme was Imagine Your Story, this is called Crocodiles, Camels, and Dugout Canoes, and it's 8 adventurous episodes. So this is from our nonfiction section. So these are all real life adventures that people went on. And there's 8 different ones in this book, and I'm going to read one of them to you. So this is a true story. It is a real true story about a man named Ernest Shackleton. Let me show you the picture. Ernest Shackleton. The Endurance was sinking as the crew of 28 men watched in numb resignation from a nearby ice floe. 10 million tons of ice were slowly crushing her to death. Like a dying animal, the ship screeched and moaned as the pressure mounted. Finally, her frames and planking broke with the sound that ripped like artillery fire through the frozen wilderness. It was October 27th, 1915. The men were the members of Ernest Shackleton's trans-Antarctic expedition. They had set out to be the first to make an overland crossing of the Antarctic continent. Now, before they had even reached land, they were stranded. They had salvaged 3 lifeboats, 70 dogs, and enough food for the next few months. But without the Endurance, Shackleton and his men were locked in a jigsaw of ice floes more than 1,000 miles from the nearest outpost of humanity, and since they had no radio, they had no means of calling for help. So this is a real-life adventure survival story. Almost a year earlier, after a brief stopover in South Georgia, a small island some 1,200 miles east of the tip of South America, the Endurance had sailed for Antarctica across the Weddell Sea. It had been a spectacularly bad season. Pack ice had begun accumulating almost from the beginning, first in narrow strips that the ship could circumvent, but then on an ever-increasing scale. When the expedition was only 400 miles from the Antarctic coast in late January 1915, the ice had closed so tightly around the Endurance that it could no longer move. From then on, there was little the men could do but monitor their drift with the currents and hope that the ice would break. Below the equator, the seasons were reversed, so by March, winter had set in, and to help his men cope with the unrelenting cold and the darkness of the polar night, each year, the sun disappears for 121 days. Shackleton had to keep them occupied. He had them arranging hockey matches, dog derbies, parlor games, and lectures. He even encouraged them to carve out ornate dog kennels, or dog glues, they were called. Shackleton knew the value of keeping morale high and not giving in to despair or sense of hopelessness. He was born in Ireland in 1874. He enlisted in the British Merchant Navy at 16. At 27, unhappy with the routine of Navy life and hungry for a great deed that would open the door for him for fame and fortune, he joined Robert F. Scott's expedition to Antarctica. Then, in 1907, Shackleton led his own expedition, the first to declare the South Pole its goal. When they were 97 miles short of their destination, a food shortage forced Shackleton and his companions to turn back. Their return journey was a desperate race with death, in which Shackleton proved himself a superb leader. He set men's souls on fire, as one man put it. Safely home, Shackleton was hailed a hero and knighted by the King of England. Now, on this, his third expedition, the ice had closed in and his ship was gone. Shackleton called all hands together. They must haul the lifeboats to open sea, he said, and then sail to South Georgia, the nearest inhabited island. It was imperative that they carry a minimum of weight. To make his point, Shackleton reached under his parka and took out a gold cigarette case and a handful of gold sovereigns and threw them away. He then astonished everyone by taking the Bible the Queen had given him and laying it in the snow. The men were permitted to keep their diaries, but a 2-pound limit was set on their other personal gear. An exception was made for their meteorologist, Leonard Hussey's zither banjo, since a little music was considered good for morale. Moving the camp across the jumbled ice proved impossible. The sleds loaded with lifeboats and provisions sank into the slush and snow and refused to budge. The men had no choice but to settle in for another long wait and hope that by the time the ice had opened up sufficiently for the boats to be launched, their flow would have drifted close to land. They now lived in a world of unending wetness and inescapable cold. They would gather around a blubber stove and dream of pastries and vegetables. Penguins showed up on their floating home and became their daily diet. Sometimes the men would catch leopard seals, a bigger, more dangerous game. Once, a 12-foot seal chased one of the men across the ice and nearly ate him for lunch. The seal was shot. 50 undigested fish were found in its stomach. Months passed. Ocean Camp was renamed Patience Camp on January 26, 1916, and Shackleton wrote across an entire page of his diary, waiting, 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 waiting. Finally, in April, their ice floe had melted to the size of a football field, and Shackleton ordered the boats launched. Fearing that the neighboring floes would smash their vessels to bits at any moment, the men scrambled for every available oar and rowed for their lives. High waves rolled over the gunwales. Soon the men were knee-deep in freezing water. One day of misery followed another. No land, just swooping birds, endless stretches of ice and sea, and killer whales threatening to capsize their boats. Once, after they camped overnight on an ice floe, the floe split in half under a tent, and one of the men plunged into the water below. Seconds before the gap closed with an explosive force, Shackleton managed to pull him to safety. After 7 days on the open sea, the snow-capped peaks of Elephant Island loomed before them. A frozen rock some 800 miles from South Georgia, Elephant Island could hardly be described as hospitable. But to Shackleton and his men, it was solid, unsinkable, and blessed land, something that they had not experienced for 496 days. Camp was made on the tiny stretch of beach. For protection against the fierce winds, the 2 smaller boats were turned upside down and made into huts. Shackleton knew that they would never be found in such a remote place. He decided to take their largest lifeboat and try to reach South Georgia, where a small community of whalers was running a whaling factory. For crew, he chose some of his most quarrelsome men in order to ease the strain on those he was leaving behind. Ahead lay Drake Passage, a treacherous sea dreaded by all sailors. For 17 days, the men struggled with hurricane-level winds, 50-foot waves, and the ever-present danger of an iceberg. Then, as they approached South Georgia, a sudden gale ripped off the boat's rudder, causing them to wash up on the uninhabited side of the island. High, uncharted mountains now separated them from the whalers. Leaving behind 3 men who were too weak to continue, Shackleton and the 2 others began a perilous climb across unknown territory. Several times they had to backtrack. Atop an ice ridge, they faced a choice between freezing to death or sliding down a steep slope that disappeared into fog. Down they went, wind shrieking in their ears until they landed abruptly in a snowbank. Recalling the crossing later, Shackleton and his 2 companions confessed to the same strange experience, a curious feeling that a 4th person was with them all along. On May 20th, 1916, 3 ragged, filthy men stumbled into the whaling factory. The manager could not believe that one of them was Ernest Shackleton. Like everyone else, he assumed that the Endurance had been lost. Recognizing Shackleton's voice, he turned away and wept. After a hot bath and a hearty meal, the first in nearly a year, Shackleton's party borrowed a boat to pick up the men on the other side of South Georgia. It took Shackleton 3 more months to rescue the crew on Elephant Island. Drake Passage thwarted him 3 times before he finally reached them. From a small boat lowered from the rescue ship, he anxiously counted the men on the beach. All 22 were there, waving at him. The harrowing adventures of the trans-Antarctic expedition were over. The inspired leadership and the sheer determination of Ernest Shackleton had triumphed. So that's pretty crazy that they were able to survive for that long, especially in those extreme conditions. So when I think of like our engineering challenges that we've been doing in our Steam to Go kits, a lot of times I like to think about like ways to solve a problem, something that will help us if we got stuck or got into trouble. So as explorers or people that are in these situations, they have to think, and they have to think about what they can use or what they have that they can create something that's going to help them stay alive or stay healthy, or provide something if they maybe need to catch rainwater, or maybe they need to figure out a way to catch fish. But they have to try to figure that out. So what your mystery challenge is. All right, so remember, you're going to get this bag. It's got the big question mark, and your directions are still in the bag, but it's a very open-ended challenge, because your challenge for this one is to, when you open it up, one of the things that is going to be in every bag is going to be a little scroll that looks just like this. And you're just going to pull the string and untie it, and inside is your challenge. Okay, so all of the challenges, there are, most of the bags are gonna have different challenges. I wanna say there may be about 30 different challenges in the bags. So there will be some, it is possible to say that you and a sibling could possibly get the same challenge, but the odds of that are not good. Chances are everybody's gonna have a different challenge. And then what you're going to do is your goal or your job is to use the items that you have in this bag, this collection of random stuff, and use that to complete the challenge that you've been given. So that's your job for this week. I would really, really love to see pictures of what your challenge is and what you have come up with. I would love for you to post them to our Facebook page. If you do, post your challenge with it. Post a picture of what your challenge was, or add that as, in the comments, so that we'll know what you were trying to create, and then what you created and maybe how it worked. So videos would be really cool. You are also welcome to stop in the library and tell me about what you did and tell me about what you created. I would love to hear how it went. I have enjoyed doing these STEAM challenges with you. I hope you've had fun. Feel free to stop by the library. I'm sure we're gonna have more stuff going on, so stop by and find out what's happening. Feel free to check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel and find more resources and more ideas. Take care. Have a great day.